Talk Politics with Congressman Tim Griffin is brought to you by the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce and Associated Industries of Arkansas, because business matters. Impact Management Group, Public Relations and Public Affairs, over a decade of issue advocacy success. Connect Arkansas, empowering entrepreneurs and Arkansans through greater utilization of the Internet. And ConwayArkansas.org. Get smart. Visit ConwayArkansas.org and see why Conway is the smart choice for business, education, and more.
All right, welcome to this edition of Talk Politics. I'm your host, Roby Brock. We're joined by Congressman Tim Griffin this morning. He represents Arkansas' 2nd Congressional District. He's here to take your questions. If you want to get in on the conversation, we got a lot of questions in queue already. Do the Talk Politics hashtag through Twitter and Facebook, or you can email me at Roby, R-O-B-Y, at talkbusiness.net. Congressman, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
All right, let's take some questions. We got
Sure.
plenty of them. Let's start first with Yarnell's Ice Cream in your district up in Searcy.
Sure.
It closed last week. It had been struggling for some time. We got a question here asking, could the government have done more to help Yarnell's, or is their collapse just a sign of free market forces, survival of the fittest?
Well, I first of all, it's a terrible news for Searcy, obviously, in terms of not only the direct jobs, but the impact and the indirect impact, all the people that live there and the families and what have you. I don't know what was going on specifically on the books, but my understanding is that they were just having difficulty keeping it in the black. So I don't know of any. I don't know what government program that they're talking about. Look, the private sector has successes and it has failures, and this is terrible news. But again, I don't know all the specific reasons, but I am hopeful that someone will purchase them. And I think I read that yesterday, that some folks might be looking at their operations. So, but I am not one that believes that the government ought to go around saving failing private businesses. I just do not believe that. Why? Because there's got to be an upside and a downside to being in a market, and the risk of the downside and the benefit of the upside are what sort of helps regulate the market. Now, again, I don't know all the specifics here. Now, the broader question is, could the government nationally be adopting policies? Could it adopt policies that help encourage economic growth? Absolutely. I advocate that every day. So if they're talking about, can the government help create an environment where jobs are created or jobs are maintained and businesses can flourish, absolutely. If they're talking about some kind of specific TARP program for Yarnell's, no, I would not advocate for that, obviously. It's a terrible deal, and again, I don't know all the specifics, but I'm hoping that something good can come out of this, so we'll see.
All right, I like this next question, so I moved it up the food chain a little bit here. This is from Alan in Little Rock. We've seen major league sports disputes between players and owners in the NFL and the NBA, and I would mention baseball and hockey too. Should Congress have more oversight and involvement in resolving these disputes or regulating professional sports?
No.
No?
No, I personally don't understand why we're as involved as we are. That's my answer.
What about collegiate sports? You hear a lot of talk about the BCS and the unfairness of some of the.
I don't think that's where Congress ought to be spending its time, to be frank with you. We've got much bigger issues, and I know that Congress does like to get involved with, or historically has, with baseball, and I've heard some talk of NFL, and I just don't think that that's a good use of Congress's time.
Okay. Let's move on to something that Congress has been deeply involved with, and you've been deeply involved with. This comes from Trevor from Haskell via email. You've stated that you would like to see spending cuts as a way to lower our national debt and balance the budget, but with national debt now at $14 trillion and climbing, it's almost impossible to lower it without also finding a way to raise revenue. Would you be willing to raise taxes only on those making over $1 million, although with major spending cuts as a way to begin reducing our national debt in a bipartisan manner?
Well, let me talk from a 30,000 feet level first here. I don't believe that the American people are taxed too little. And I brought some charts with me, which I know are over there, and I won't grab for them. But I have studied this intently and to figure out how we can get out of this mess. And the first thing I have concluded in looking at the data is that we've had a pretty steady revenue stream over the decades, meaning we have been at approximately 18% of GDP as revenue. That's about the average, okay? It's gone up a little bit, it's gone down a little bit. And the funny thing is, even when rates have been reduced, we still have stayed at about 18%. So we have spent at an average of around 20 or so % of GDP, which means we've been financing that gap between 18 and the 20 with ultimately with debt. That deficit has turned into debt. Now, that's a relatively minor deficit when you look at where we're heading. And if you look at the charts, it is very clear that revenue is relatively steady and that the spending is what has gone off the chart. So when I look at this, the first thing I say to folks is this is a spending-driven problem. And I think the different way of looking at this problem has to do with whether you consider the spending problem we have one of addiction or not. I view what has happened in Washington not as just an accounting error or we just one year we just spent too much and we're going to try to fix it. That's not what has happened. What has happened over time is that politicians of both parties, members of the Senate and the House, presidents, politicians generally over the decades, have believed that it was in their interest to spend more. And that's what they've done. And they have continued to spend more because they thought that's what people wanted. And if you look at the numbers, to me it's like someone with a gambling addiction. They're sitting at the slot machine, and if they looked up to you and said, I don't have a gambling problem, I just don't have enough money, you would say to them, well, that's silly. You've got to address the problem. And so when I peel back the spending problem, which I think is the core, when I peel that back, what I see under that is a discipline problem. And I personally do not believe that more money into the federal coffers is going to fix the discipline problem. That's the perspective, that's where I come from. And then I say, Roby, this is not, as lawyers say, a case of first impression. We're not the first country to ever have a debt problem, okay? So then I start saying, well, why don't we look at the other countries and see what they did and see which ones succeeded and see which ones failed. And I think we've talked about this before, but some economists have done this. And if you look at the countries that focused on the revenue side, they have predominantly, if not exclusively, failed. If you look at the countries that address the spending side, where I see the discipline problem, they have succeeded. And so the issue here is, are we going to just act as if there's not an underlying addiction problem, addiction to spending? Is that what we're going to do? Because if we do that, we are, in fact, kicking the can down the road again. And I think if you look at why these countries that had debt failed when they raised taxes, two reasons. Giving the politicians who got you in this mess more money is not going to get you out of the mess. and number two, increasing taxes, particularly on people who create jobs, when only half of the people in the country pay taxes anyway. That's not going to help economic growth. So I would say no. Now, I am for tax reform.
Well, let me interrupt you just a second here, because I want to stay on the spending side of things, because we've got a question about that. Republicans like to talk about spending cuts, but we never see any details. This is from what specific programs would you like to see cut, and how much will they usually save? Can you point to some specific things?
Well, first of all, I would say that I disagree with the premise of the question. Why? We've been... If we haven't provided any specifics, then why have I been attacked for cutting spending for the last 6 months? If you haven't seen our specifics on spending cuts, then you haven't been reading the appropriations bills. And I know that's not something about, look, I wouldn't sit around and read appropriations bills either. But we have voted on several appropriations bills, including Homeland Security and the Ag bill and the Defense bill, and MILCON, military construction, and we're going to continue to vote on these appropriations bills. If you want to see the specifics, sure, there are thousands of pages here, and it is in some places we are zeroing out programs altogether, and in other places we are trimming back. But there are so many specifics. There are thousands of pages of specifics.
Is that on your website anywhere?
No, but they are on the appropriations. If you just go to Google, key in House Appropriations Committee, the appropriations bills are there. The ones that have been finalized, some of them have not been voted on yet. But there are scores of specifics. I'll just talk about the alternate engine project that I think we've talked about before. But even on the defense side, and this is where I part ways with some folks on my side of the aisle, I believe we've got to look everywhere. And if you can't tell me that every dollar at the Pentagon is spent wisely. I know it's not. You can't even tell me every dollar at the Pentagon is spent on national security, because it's not. There's all sorts of stuff hidden in there, because over the years, lawmakers have known if they can put it in the defense budget, it's more protected, because people are less likely to cut it out of the defense budget. So there are things there that I would cut. I fought to end the alternate engine project, which is an extra engine in development for the F-35, and in fact went head-to-head with the Speaker and some others on that issue. And but if you look, you can either look at our HR1, which is what we set forth as the cuts for the year for 2011, or you can look at the appropriations bills that relate to 2012. But there are literally almost every government program in a lot of these appropriations bills have either been kept level or decreased. The Farm Bill, for example, was a 13% decrease over the last one. Well, and that's not a Washington decrease. In Washington, if it's less than what the president asked for, even if it's more than last year, folks call that a decrease. That's not what I'm talking about. It was 13% less than the last bill, 22% less than what the president requested. And you can literally go through page after page after page. Yeah.
Let me ask you about defense cuts there. If there was someone that came after some deep defense cuts that would have affected the Jacksonville Air Force Base, the Little Rock Air Force Base, what would your position be on defending the base or defending the cut?
Sure. Well, I would defend the base, because I believe that C-130s, having flown around Afghanistan and Iraq, I believe C-130s are critical to our national security. That's not hard to justify. The beauty of a base like Little Rock Air Force Base is it is the training center for C-130s. C-130s are a critical, both humanitarian and defense part of our infrastructure. it's not hard to defend C-130s. It's not hard to defend C-130 training. They speak for themselves. And we have a unique role in that regard because we are the training center of excellence. So when you're looking through, the good news is when you're looking through the defense budget, a place like Little Rock Air Force Base is not the type that people are going to go, well, we just don't need C-130s. I mean, that's just not going to happen. That's not what we're talking about.
That's good for a congressman that represents that district,
yes.
Isn't it? Yeah.
But there are some congressmen that represent places that aren't easy to justify, and they're going to have, that's going to be tough.
We got a couple of questions on high-speed and inter-city passenger rail service. I'll just kind of pick one, and we'll try to merge all the questions into that. Arkansas has designated routes on the national high-speed and inter-city passenger rail network, Memphis to Little Rock to Dallas. Do you support efforts to bring higher-speed passenger rail service to Arkansas in that corridor?
And that's a good question. I met with one of the leaders on from the Texas side of this corridor who's working with North Little Rock Mayor Hayes. You know, I am still a skeptic when it comes to massive national high-speed rail. You know, I told the folks I met with in Dallas that. Not because it wouldn't be great to have. Look, I've been on the high-speed trains in France. I've been on high-speed trains in Spain and maybe somewhere else. And I understand that they are efficient in Europe. I understand that they're great to travel on. I also understand that the United States, in terms of our geographical size, is not France. Texas is about the size of France, and you know, I could possibly understand a Dallas to Houston corridor, something like that. When you start expanding this all over the United States, the idea of high-speed rail, I'm a skeptic on that.
Now, is it because of the infrastructure spending and the fact that you'd be spending new money in some new areas?
No, it has more to do with whether that is something with the American culture and the love of cars and the love of travel and the way that we go about doing things, particularly outside the Northeast Corridor. Northeast Corridor is a little different because everything is so compact, but I am still, so I am not ruling that out, but I've got some more, other folks have more convincing to do, particularly at a time when money is so tight.
I got a question here about the Casey Anthony verdict. Do you want to go there?
No, I mean, I respect.
What's your opinion on the Casey Anthony verdict?
You know, I respect the jury on that. I disagree with it, but I respect them.
Who is your pick? This comes from David in North Little Rock. Who is your pick for president in 2012? I assume you will not be supporting President Obama.
No, I will not be supporting President Obama. I have not decided to say publicly who I'm going to support yet because I have not fully committed to anybody yet. I'm real close, and we talked about this the last time you interviewed me, and I told you that I want to be involved in that because I think it's important. But you know, I'm just not ready to go there yet. But it'll be soon. I will tell you this: I think that by Labor Day, the field should be complete, and I think they'll be off to the races in a way that they're not right now.
Do you want to narrow it down for everybody that's watching right now to maybe your top 3 picks that you're considering?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think Romney, Pawlenty, and probably somebody not yet in the race. So that probably is.
So vague. I think we can figure some of that out there. Scott via email asks, do you think there is too much money in politics? What can be done to change the influence of money in the process, or do you think the process is okay as it is?
Well, I can tell you that it takes a lot of my time to raise money, and time that I would rather be focused on other things, whether it be other work, official work, or whether it be with my family or whatever. So I certainly know that it takes a lot of time. When I look at it, it's sort of like democracy. It's not a perfect system, but it's the best we have. I look at the alternatives to what we have. I don't want the government paying for my campaign, and I certainly don't want the government paying for a potential opponent who may not want to work as hard as I do. So I am not for government public funding of elections. I have thought about this a lot. When people say there's too much money in politics, if you compare what is spent on political advertising to what is spent on McDonald's advertising and hairspray advertising and all of these other sort of routine things, it really is not, as a percentage of that, it's not that much. It's actually, and I know you would like people to spend more money on political advertising, but the point is, when you look at the main component of political spending, it is what? Radio and TV. Mm-hmm. If you took away the radio and TV from fundraising, you wouldn't have to raise much, because then you'd just be paying for bumper stickers and signs and events and things like that. So do I want the federal government to make people run ads or whatever instead of me paying? No. And so I guess my answer there would be I don't see an alternative to what we have, as much as I would rather spend my time doing other things than raising money. I think that there are challenges to the system we have, but it's better than the alternative.
All right. Well, maybe you'll run unopposed and you won't have to raise as much money. Kind of a follow-up to this question here. Recently, Congressman Mike Ross, this was just late last week, made a statement that there were not enough swing districts in America to govern well. That was the gist of his comment there. The spirit of his remarks are basically that there are so many hardcore partisan Republican and Democratic districts, it makes it easy for some of those folks to vote a certain way and does not create as much spirit of compromise in Congress. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I didn't hear him say that. My initial reaction is that the country's pretty divided. And I mean, if you look at the 2000 presidential election and you look at 2004 to a lesser extent, I think you see a pretty we don't have this problem as much in Arkansas, or this issue as much in Arkansas, but I think you see a country that's pretty divided. And sometimes it is by party, but a lot of time it's by urban versus rural on some issues. I'm not sure exactly what he's suggesting. He's not suggesting that lines be drawn to.
I don't think it was a speech he was making to like a business group.
I'd have to figure out what exactly he's proposing there. But look, I think that the second district. We can talk about things being districts being one way or the other. But look, we had two districts flip parties in this state in November. So, and it wasn't because we were close ideologically with our predecessors. So, I think that I think people are able to exercise their judgment. I'm not sure where that's going, I'm not sure where that's going. But I think people reflect the people they represent in large part, and that's the way it's supposed to work, isn't it?
All right, last question because we're running short on time. It deals with the debt ceiling issue that is upon us here. How do you see the debt ceiling vote coming down? Negotiations are going on right now. Do you have a firm position as to where you stand at this point?
I do. First of all, how much time we got?
We got about 5 minutes.
Okay. First of all, we're going to get an update when we get back to D.C. Today. I'm flying up in about a couple hours. What I'm afraid of is folks are going to try to kick the can down the road. Because it's an election cycle, and if you're in the House, every cycle is an election cycle. I feel like the hard decisions are going to be, they're going to try, would it be the president or Harry Reid or whoever, that they're going to try to put the big decisions on the other side of the presidential election. If I feel like that's what's being done, I'm a no. The problem we have is that we've kicked the can down the road too long. And it's interesting. President Clinton appointed, we talked about this before, a Medicare commission in 1998. Now, that tells you we've known that Medicare had a big problem for over a decade. And what have we done about it? Nothing. Why? Because people run ads against you when you start to do things on Medicare. I know. I want to save Medicare. And I have a great quote. Can I grab this? No? Okay. Senator Lieberman, I don't have the exact quote, so let me just say, Senator Lieberman came out this week and he said, former Democrat, now an independent, he said, Medicare as we know it, as it currently is constituted, cannot be saved. Because if you leave it exactly as we know it, it goes bankrupt. And you see benefit cuts and tax increases. He said the only way you're going to save Medicare is if you reform it. Well, no one wants to reform it, or I won't say no one. A lot of people want to kick that down the road. If this deal, whatever this deal is, and it will have to be a deal because our system requires, the Senate and the House to agree with the president to make anything into law. So it will be a deal. But if it puts all the hard decisions off to another day, and it talks about savings in 10 years and savings in 6 years and all that, I'm going to vote against it. Because you know what? What we've learned is anytime someone's telling you they're going to fix the hard stuff down the road, they never fix the hard stuff. And that's what I'm concerned about.
What if the deal is trillions of dollars of spending cuts versus hundreds of millions of dollars of tax increases, but there's a net balance of reducing the problem, reducing the spending problem? Well, could you support that?
No, probably not. If it's tax increases, because this is not a revenue issue. And if you think this is a revenue issue, you haven't yet gotten to the point where you see this as an addiction issue. And that's it's like an intervention. And there's a bunch of us who are going to be hated by the people who are or by the government who's the subject of the intervention. But we're trying to intervene for the federal government to say, hey, this is an addiction problem. It's a spending addiction. Now, but let me say this. And this is not news, I am an advocate for tax reform that reduces the top rate and closes deductions so we have a fairer, flatter tax system. That is precisely what the Debt Commission, or at least I'll say precisely, that's in principle what the Debt Commission proposed. That is what is in the House budget that we passed. We have advocated for lowering the top rate, making it more predictable, fairer, and flatter, and closing off a lot of deductions. That's in our House budget that we passed in March. So that's not new. And but they can't say, well, we're going to close all loopholes, leave tax rate exactly as it is. That's not tax reform. So it'll be interesting to see. I can tell you that I still think there are a lot of people that don't understand, in my view, how serious this is in terms of reforming the entitlements. And I'm talking about the president and some of those folks. And if they try to kick the can down the road, I'm going to tell them the road ended. And that's the problem. We just can't do it anymore.
All right. Well, our road and our time has ended. So, Congressman Tim Griffin, thank you for being with us today.
You want to do another 30 minutes?
We'll do it maybe,
right now. Let's do it.
Maybe in the future. You got a plane to catch. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been the latest edition of Talk Politics. I'm Roby Brock. Take care.